I had been non-monogamous in an open relationship for a very long time, but I was really starting to get into what I would call polyamory. That's actually really funny because that is what I get. I get you look really familiar. Do I know you from somewhere? Because no one wants to say, I really liked you in this porn.
He fetishized the idea of you being a porn star, but then when the reality happened, it just took him totally off guard.
I think he thought it would be so hot to have a porn star girlfriend until he had one.
My name is Abby, and I'm the voice behind the Evolving Love Project. In this podcast, my husband and I deep dive into the topics of non-monogamy and polyamory, drawing from our experiences of being consensually non-monogamous for almost a decade.
And my name is Liam. Whether you're monogamous, polyamorous, curious, or anything in between, we invite you to join us for this conversation.
Let's begin.
We are excited to announce that we have our first live podcast at the iconic National Film and Sound Archives of Australia on the 26th of July. Tickets and information available in the show notes.
What a treat we have for you today on the Evolving Love podcast. We are joined by a superstar of the adult entertainment industry.
Casey Calvert is an award-winning adult director, writer, performer, and content creator. An 11-year veteran of the industry, she won Director of the Year and Best Screenplay at the 2023 XBiz Awards, the Golden Globes of porn.
Casey is constantly working to better integrate a modern sensibility towards issues of polyamory, alternative relationship structures, mental health, and gender identity into her cinematic work.
This approach is perfectly exemplified in her award-winning work, Primary. Produced by Erica Luss Cinema, Primary is an original series written and directed by Casey that explores diverse and authentic non-monogamous relationships.
Spanning 3 captivating series, the show follows 2 polyamorous couples played by Kira Noir, Small Hands, Derek Pierce and Anna Fox as they navigate love and lust. Casey joined us for this conversation from her home in Los Angeles, where she currently resides with her terrier.
In today's wide-ranging conversation, we discuss Casey's own journey in non-monogamy and polyamory, porn stars' approaches to monogamy, parasocial relationships, dating as a famous adult actress, the recent shifts in her marriage and the process of disentanglement, directing realistic porn, controversy with the title Primary, expressing eroticism in her personal life, and so much more.
So now we bring you Casey Calvert.
Casey, thank you so much for joining us on the Evolving Love podcast. We're so excited to have you here, and in particular to talk about your series for Erica Lust and her production company, and that is Primary. Now, Primary is an incredible show that we have been absolutely devouring in preparation for this interview. But what we want to start off by talking about is why you think it was important within the porn context to showcase non-monogamous relationships.
That's actually a great question. And I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that question before. When I first pitched the idea of Primary to Erica, I wanted to write something that was very true to myself. She was offering me an opportunity to kind of tell whatever story I wanted to tell. And at the time I had been non-monogamous in an open relationship for a very long time, but I was really starting to get into what I would call polyamory, and more in-depth relationships, more love across multiple people kind of relationships. And for me as a writer, I like writing about my own stuff because it's how I process it. And so I just wanted to tell a story about what I was feeling and what I was going through. And in the porn space, you get a lot of freedom that doesn't necessarily exist in a mainstream media space. And so I could tell the story the way I wanted to tell it.
such an amazing opportunity to do that. When we were watching Primary, which is just so amazing, I can feel that it is written and created by somebody who has real life lived experience in this space. Like you could just feel it immediately. And I love the way in which the characters sort of intertwine and overlap, you know, within the episodes. And as we were watching, it did feel similar to that show, what was it called? Easy, that we watched, which was one of my favorite TV shows ever. And it felt like similar to that, except there was sort of no bounds. Like when the romance and the connection was happening, you know, we weren't blocked off from that experience. And just so well done, Casey.
Thank you.
Casey joined us from her home in Los Angeles, where she currently resides with her terrier.
Easy is a huge inspiration for Primary, but Easy was my source material, so to speak. I love Easy. I think it's such an incredible show, and that is exactly where I got the idea to have the overlapping relationships. Also, one of the things I feel like living in Los Angeles specifically, I haven't really encountered this in any of the other places I've ever lived, but Los Angeles is this massive city. There's 7 million people here or something like that. But there's also like a total of 5
So
people.
now we bring you...
And you just consistently run into the same people over and over and over and over again. And everybody's lives just mesh together over and over and over again. And so that is part of what I wanted to infuse into Primary.
In particularly the non-monogamous space, I feel like people's perceptions are that there's just lots of non-monogamous people, especially now with like some increased kind of media attention on non-monogamy and polyamory. But it is funny, like you're saying, that it does often feel like everyone's dating the same person. It's kind of like this really interesting kind of spider's web. So I wonder, when you were kind of embarking on the process of writing the screenplay for Primary, how did you think about condensing all these amazing experiences and life experiences of your own non-monogamous journey into something that would eventually become the script?
So each character is based on multiple different people in my life. I didn't want to have a single character represent a single person. That feels unfair to me, for lack of a better word. So my own personality is infused into multiple characters. People who were my partners at the time are infused into multiple characters. And I started with the core relationship of Abigail and Parker. They were my core, and I wanted them to stay my core. And then I just figured out who was dating who in a way that made what I was hoping would feel like a realistic kind of spiderweb situation, but also allowed me to film the commercial aspect of the show, which is the sex scenes, and give me some different interesting sex scene pairings as well.
The sex scenes are so amazing. Episode 2 of season 1, where the couple, they go to the bar together, she's getting ready. The realism of it, you know, it's 2 people who are, you know, they're together for the first time. They met that night. It's playful. It's a little bit awkward. It's like funny. There's lubricant involved. There's all of these little micro moments that happen in real sex. And I'm just so grateful to see that, because that is something that, you know, I think in so many people's experience, it can be like lacking across the board when we're watching pornography. And for me, when I was watching it, I was just thinking, this is so important. And even as a mother, I'm thinking one day, like, I would want my son, if he's going to watch porn, which I'm sure he will at some point, to watch something like that, you know, which has care and connection across, you know, in a space like that. But I also want to say that scene really that episode really jumped out at me, the realism of it in the non-monogamous space, because Liam and I, we have been that couple who have gone to the bar and have separated from each other. So as we were watching it, I'm going, Liam, that's us. And especially being like in an early part of, you know, exploring non-monogamy as well. I remember that couple in the show, they were quite new in their experience of non-monogamy. And so just even the realism of that scenario was just like really interesting.
And so is that scene where this couple kind of go to the bar and then the wife or the partner splits off from the person they arrived with, is that something that was based on an experience of your own in a non-monogamous context?
So that particular episode was actually a short story that I wrote once before, a couple of years before, not a couple of years, a year or so before I started writing primary. Was not sexting with a partner while I was on a plane, but we were having a sexy conversation about a fantasy of his. And he was telling me about this fantasy of going to a bar with a partner and watching her meet someone else and knowing that she was going to go home with someone else that night and how hot that was to him. And so I was on a plane, trapped like you are on a plane, and wrote this entire short story about it. And then when I started writing primary, it was like, oh, this has to go in. That the character played by Small Hands, who is the man in this particular scene, was based a lot on this same partner who had this fantasy. And I was like, oh, it's got to go in. I got to do this thing. And then talking about all of the realism, it is very important to me to talk about that porn is entertainment. It's not education. We're not making an educational product. But at the same time, I personally prefer watching something that looks more like real sex than something that looks like what would be considered stereotypical porn sex. And so for me, it's finding that balance between filming something sexy and something hot and something that is this commercial product, while also filming something that feels as close to real life as possible. And for me, the way I do that is through casting. I cast people in my movies who are excited about performing real sex. And then I just let them do it. I just give them a little bit of instruction. They have the script. They know where they're supposed to start. They know where they're supposed to end. In this particular scene, they know the moment where the guy played by Michael Vegas is supposed to grab the condom, all of that. But beyond that, I just let them go and just film it. And I don't cut. I don't stop unless the performers need to. And I just let them flow. And I think that it is what allows me to capture this reality.
And that scene that we're talking about with Michael and Kira Noir, it is so deeply erotic. And when we were watching it, we're kind of like conflicted. It's like, it's so arousing. It's like we're kind of sitting there almost in a state of like arousal paralysis, because it's different to how you would interact with kind of this stereotypical kind of porn. And it really did feel, it's like, I don't know if it was a continuous shot, but it really did feel like a continuous shot where it was like a continuous sequence of them just exploring. And in the behind the scenes videos and interviews, Kira actually says that an amazing thing for her and a really liberating thing for her when acting in this was actually that you had given that direction. I want you just to it not to be necessarily performative, very stereotypical kind of like porn-based acting, that you just want it to be super realistic. So is that something that you just kind of directly went in with all the actors and you said, this is really where I want you to take it and just see where it goes?
Yeah, when I'm directing movies for Erica Lust, I have a little speech that I say to the performers beforehand that talks about I'm not going to tell them when to stop. I want them to find out. I want them to figure out with each other when they're done. I'm not going to tell either one of them when to have an orgasm. I don't want a performer with a penis to feel like they have to ejaculate if they don't want to. I talk about that the only thing that's important to me is that they stay in character and that they perform this sex the way that these characters would, rather than them as people, but that how these characters would. And I hire people who I trust to be able to do that. I tell them they don't have to open them to the camera. They don't have to do stereotypical porn positions. They don't have to do anything that they don't want to do. I'm not telling them any kind of length of time for anything, any number of positions. All of these things are really normal when you go to shoot a porn scene. We joke that it's always like 5 positions and then a pop. Each one of those 5 positions, 5 minutes each, and then a pop at the ends. I just essentially tell them, because I work mostly with very established professional full-time porn performers. And so I chat with them. I try to break their brain a little bit. And then I let them go for it.
Really does translate on the screen.
And so when you were writing the scripts, this character of, she meets this guy at the bar, still on this episode, I feel like there are some really interesting ethical kind of pulls. And I feel like, especially in the non-monogamous space, there's a lot of sort of like, oh, is this okay? Or like, how would we interact with somebody who's like joining for the first time? And it's like, not only are we watching this incredible porn that is so beautiful, but it's such a conversation starter as well, which is so fascinating because I feel so invested in the characters, and it was really amazing because I was watching this scene, but I had it in the back of my mind that this man who she was with, he didn't know that she was married. He didn't know that her partner was there watching. So when you were writing the script, was that sort of in your mind that you wanted to have this sort of, there's like an underlying sort of question in the episode?
So one of the things that I do throughout the entire series is I have that core couple, Abigail and Parker, Anna Fox and Derek Pierce. And they are my established, mostly ethical, but they're doing their best polyamorous couple. They've been married for a while. They've been open for a while. They're figuring out things as things happen and feelings change and all of that. But they're the couple that reads the books and does the work. Mm-hmm. And then specifically in season 1, I have Jacob and Eva, who is Kira and Small Hands, and they're the more stereotypical straight couple who's like, what would be hot? What if we had a threesome? And they have done no work. They are absolutely, if their story continued, they're going to hunt a unicorn. They're like not necessarily engaging in non-monogamy in an ethical way. They're not being malicious. They're not purposely trying to be harmful or unethical. They're just thinking about this for more of a sex perspective and a what turns me on perspective rather than a human being perspective. So that absolutely is something that is part of what I thought about as I was writing. And in this episode, in episode 2, this was all about their fantasies. And it wasn't really thinking so much about like, oh, this other guy, he should probably know. It would probably be cool to tell him. But the characters aren't thinking about that. That hasn't occurred to either one of them.
Those kind of ethical things to play with, of course, with the main key characters, like you were saying with Derek and Anna, they have that situation where Penny Pax is kind of cheating on her husband. And there's this amazing kind of discussion between the two of them. And I think at one point, Anna Fox, she says, leave them better than you found them, which I've heard Dan Savage say, a whole bunch. And I don't know if you drew it in particular inspiration from Dan Savage, but it's such a beautiful sentiment to have displayed on screen.
Yeah, that is absolutely stolen from Dan Savage. I can take no credit for coming up with that phrase, but it is something that, especially as I personally engage in non-monogamy, something that's really important for me to consider is this leave them better than you found them kind of idea. I'm the kind of person that feels like a relationship is not a failure just because it ended. But it is a bad thing if you harmed someone in the process. And that, not everything lasts forever, but you should try to make someone better. You should try to be as good as possible while you're with somebody. And so like, that's a great example of me trying to like sprinkle in a little bit of education here in this piece of entertainment. Because Anna's character does not like that her husband is engaging in a relationship with someone who's cheating. That makes her feel very uncomfortable. She also doesn't want to veto this person or be that kind of partner. So she is struggling with what to do in this situation. And she's, in this particular conversation, very upset with her husband that he is letting this happen. And it feels uncomfortable and unethical to her.
And I love the way in which you show there's that metamor connection as well, where she takes the time to say, we're actually going to grab a coffee. Let's sit down and speak about this. This is my long-term partner. I know him very well. And, I want to share with you a little bit more about what's really going on here, because I can see that you're very new to this and you're under a bit of an illusion as to what this might be, because this other partner is clearly coming at this from a monogamous infidelity lens, really. And that's such a beautiful, powerful scene between the two women where they're having that conversation. And it's just, yeah, it absolutely is an education, Casey. It's amazing.
Thank you. I actually had to shoot that scene twice because the first time we did it, I wasn't happy with the emotional message behind it. It wasn't playing right for me. It wasn't playing honest to me. And so we reshot it and it was much better the second time. Rewrote it, reshot it.
Do you remember what you changed in the rewrite?
Pretty much the entire conversation. I couldn't tell you specifically. The biggest thing I changed was the location, because I did not have access to the location for a second time. But beyond that, I wish I remembered more. We shot that in the fall of 2019 was when we shot season 1, and so that was a minute ago. I wish I remembered. I'm sorry, I don't.
No, I love it. One of the things that I really connected with in that particular conversation was when Anna's character was telling Penny's character that, like almost like she knew what Penny's character needed. She was like, my husband is actually not what you need in a partner. He's not actually available. He can't give you what you need. I feel like I know what you need. You need way much more kind of emotional support. You need way much more access. And my husband just can't give that to you. And even that in itself is such a powerful message.
Yeah, in season 1, Anna's character is very much the wise one. And really in season 2 as well. In season 3 is when I let her make the mistakes.
But looping back, I'd love to talk to you about how you initially kind of started exploring non-monogamy and what were your kind of initial experiences and how you found yourself in these non-monogamous contexts.
So I started dating a lot later than a lot of people often do. I had the first person I would consider a serious boyfriend. I was 21, and he was in his 50s. And so when I started dating, in hindsight, I made a lot of mistakes. I was dating people who I was very into, but who weren't necessarily right for me. I was cheating on all of them, making monogamous commitments to people and then almost immediately violating that commitment. I was kind of a mess. And then along the way met someone who is still a current partner of mine, who I've been with now for 11 years. And when I met him, he, I guess, explained to me what non-monogamy is and how that can be a relationship style. And I was like, oh, cool. Got it. That works for me. And then that was it. And then from that point on, I was like, oh yeah, I'm not monogamous. That's not going to be a thing that works for me and my brain. I like variety and I like having the space to be able to explore what I feel with someone. I felt very constrained by monogamy, obviously, because I was not being monogamous. And so for a very long time, what non-monogamy looked like to me was what I would consider just being open, meeting someone, having sex with someone, not really necessarily forming deeper connections with people. And this is all outside of work. Like at this time, I am working as a porn performer. I don't count that as part of my non-monogamy. That is work. That is different. I know a lot of porn performers who consider themselves monogamous and they still absolutely go to work and do their job, but they have their partner and they are monogamous with their partner. So excluding work stuff, it was more just about hookups and meeting interesting people and that sort of thing. And then around 2019-ish, started to develop feelings for someone who had previously been a hookup. And a fuck buddy, for lack of a better word. And started to get closer to that person. COVID happened, ended up in each other's COVID bubbles, got closer, and started to do more learning about non-monogamy and different styles of non-monogamy, and do some work, and had a lot of conversations with my partner, who at the time was very much my primary partner, and talking with him and working with him about changing feelings and shifting structures and all. And so, yeah, that's when I started to consider myself polyamorous, and that is still how I feel.
Was that kind of initial introspection and those discussions with your partner, was that in the sense of kind of analyzing, were you a hierarchical kind of polyamory relationship, or what form that polyamory would actually take?
Yeah, it was more just about what it was going to look like for us. He has been always very open and accepting of anything that I've been feeling when it comes to non-monogamy. And so a lot of it was coming from me, and me feeling a lot of guilt and a lot of worry that I was hurting him. And so a lot of the conversations were essentially him reassuring me that me developing loving feelings for someone else wasn't hurting him, wasn't making him jealous, that he was going to come to me and ask for things that he needed when he felt like he needed things that he wanted to ask for. And so it was just a lot of what I would consider looser conversations. Really, we probably, in hindsight, should have had a little bit more conversations about hierarchy and about couples privilege and about other stuff. But it was something that happened over the span of like 18 months. And so it was a lot of me feeling insecure, even though I was the person who was also exploring another relationship at the time.
It's so interesting how these things can come up even when there is that support and that openness for the conversation, or for you to have feelings for somebody else. I know for Liam and I, the first time that I had, very strong, real feelings for the first partner that I ever dated, a man outside of, our relationship, even though I had so much love and support and encouragement and compersion from Liam, I actually found it quite distressing initially that I was having these big, strong feelings for somebody else, because the guilt triggers were like huge because of the programming. So that sounds like that was something that was coming up for you as well.
Absolutely. That's actually a very great, concise way to describe how I was feeling. Because I was receiving so much support and so much compersion and all of these other really good feelings, but my internal programming was like, oh no, bad, you're being bad.
Had your partner had experience in non-monogamy before you guys started exploring it?
Yeah, so when I met him, he had already been non-monogamous for many years. He had a previous long-term girlfriend who, at one point, him and her and another one of her partners all lived together. Had been non-monogamous essentially forever, I think he would say. And so for him, as him and I started dating, it was him saying to me, like, I'm not available to be monogamous. I can't offer that. And I was like, what do you mean? What else is there? I didn't know there were other options. And then I wish I could remember that very first conversation, but I can't. But I do remember very quickly really just being like, cool, great. That sounds great. Let's do that. That is what I want to do.
And how soon did you meet his partner or partners?
So at the time, he did not have another partner. From when him and I started dating until now, he hasn't had any serious partners until relatively recently. He now has someone who is a pretty serious partner. She is actually like right over there in the other house. And that has been a shift in our dynamic, because this is the first time that he's ever had like a real serious partner. But now that I've been doing non-monogamy and polyamory for a while, I feel like I have the language to ask him for what I need when I need it and talk to him about stuff. And we have a lot of open conversations. And one of the things that we've really tried to do is minimize couples privilege as much as possible. That's a big thing we're working on. And like doing some disentangling while still remaining in each other's lives. There's been a lot of changes having nothing to do with him having another partner. It's just been changes mostly that I have been feeling.
So when you talk about disentangling this couple's privilege, can you give us a few examples of real day-to-day things that you've been putting into place to make that disentanglement happen?
So the big thing is that we currently live separately.
Mm-hmm.
We're super privileged. The property that I own has 2 houses on it. It used to be a house and a big garage, and now it's 2 houses. And so I live in the back house and he lives in the front house. And so we each have our own completely separate spaces. And that is something that has been working really well for us. He can have his girlfriend over and it doesn't affect me in any way. I don't accidentally walk in on them doing whatever. She can also exist in that space without feeling like she's in somebody else's home other than his. And I feel like that's really important. Like as someone who is the partner, as like the metamor, I don't want her to feel like she's interrupting my life or in my space. And I feel like that's a big part of couples privilege that I've experienced on the other side. And so that's probably the biggest change that we've made is this like physical separation while still, the houses are 20 feet. So we're still very close together, but we still have some separation.
We hope you are enjoying this interview. Do you want more Evolving Love and exclusive access to 2 extra full podcast episodes each month and my full writing archive? If so, you can sign up for premium access at evolvingloveproject.substack.com.
You can also follow or subscribe and share this episode with someone you care about and help us continue to add more voices to the conversation here at Evolving Love.
Yeah, that's amazing, Casey. That's so cool that the two of you were able to sort of like make those separations while still being connected and still being close by. I feel like Esther Perel would be incredibly proud of you right now. I'm sure you're very familiar with Esther Perel's work, but the beauty of like actually having a bit of distance from your partner as well to also keep that flame and that desire alive and that sort of curiosity for one another. So as much as it's so amazing and so open-hearted of you to be thinking from the perspective of your metamor and having her not in your space, it's also like a beautiful thing for like having some distance with your partner, I'm sure as well.
Oh yeah. It's also absolutely a selfish thing of me feeling like I need my own space and I need to do more taking care of myself and more figuring out my own stuff. I had until now never really lived by myself, never really had a space that was just mine. And I was feeling like I needed that. And so we actually moved into the 2 separate houses before he met this partner who he's currently with. So that was a shift in our relationship before he started doing dating.
I mean, it's almost like kitchen table polyamory, but just with multiple tables.
Multiple kitchens.
Multiple kitchens, multiple tables.
Yeah.
And because how do you find dating with, obviously you've got such a public profile and you've been in the adult industry for so long. I imagine those situations like Small Hands when, his partner's at the bar. I imagine it's quite difficult for you to go to a bar and try and pick up an unsuspecting, partner without them going, hang on a second, I swear I know you from somewhere.
So that's actually really funny because that is what I get. I get you look really familiar. Do I know you from somewhere? Because no one wants to say, hey, I really liked you in this porn. Just in case it's not who you think you're talking to. That's my theory anyway. But dating as a porn person is genuinely pretty awful. I'm not going to lie. Going on a dating app is pretty terrible that I actually stopped doing apps altogether I don't know, a while ago. Because every person just wants to get to know the porn person and they just, everybody wants to check off that little check of like, oh yeah, I hooked up with a porn star. And so I was just running into that over and over and over and over and over again. That now I'm not really doing any dating. I'm really focusing on myself right now, which I know sounds very cliche, but that is what I'm doing right now. I'm really focusing on dating myself and finding myself and loving myself. And, at some point I feel like I'll be ready to to try and start dating again, and then I'll figure that out when I get there.
Beautiful. I think it is so important to take that time out for yourself as well. And I know for myself, I've gone through big periods of time where Liam has been my only partner and I haven't been dating, but I still identify as a non-monogamous person. I'm still have non-monogamous, belief systems and values, and just sort of in who I am with my friendships or how I interact with people. And I think it is a good thing, I think, to take that time out as well. Do you feel like with your dating, you've said you're not on the apps and things like that, when you will start dating again, when you meet people, would it usually be sort of through friends of friends or recommendations, or just sort of the people who you're moving around within the creative circles? Is that sort of, where you might meet someone?
I think that everyone who I've ever dated, and everyone who I've ever been in serious relationships with, has always been an accident. I have never met someone when I've been actively looking. And so I assume that pattern will continue. I assume that someone's going to come along at some point and they're going to catch my interest, and I won't necessarily be actively looking, but there they are. And then, who knows? And that's one of the things I love about polyamory, is that if I was in a monogamous relationship and someone comes along and I find them very interesting and I want to go out and get a coffee with them, if I'm in a heterosexual monogamous relationship and this is a person of the opposite gender, now all of a sudden, is it a date? Am I allowed to go talk to this person over coffee? It becomes so incredibly complicated in a way I am just not interested in living my life. And so it works out better for me this way.
Do you go into those dating situations or these potential chances for meeting people with the idea that just assuming people know who you are? Or do you have to kind of consider, what do I drop first? One, that I'm a famous porn star, or the other one that I'm non-monogamous? It's which are you gonna lead with?
It depends on the person. And it depends on the situation. There are some friend groups who I'm very out about being non-monogamous, and only some of them know about porn. Pretty much every porn person I've ever met has been very accepting of non-monogamy.
Yeah.
And so if it's a person met through a porn person or something in that side of my life, there isn't really either one of those awkward conversations. It's just by the way, I do porn. By the way, I'm non-monogamous. And both of those things are really easily accepted. It's more of in the quote vanilla parts of my life where those conversations are tricky and honestly kind of scary sometimes.
It was really interesting what you shared before about your porn acting. That's very different to, your own personal relationships and your own personal story. I'm very interested in the sort of emotional dynamics in that space, for people who are in the porn industry acting, but they do identify as monogamous, and these sort of feelings that might come up with jealousy or, envy or things like that in the workspace. It's something that I've always been fascinated with, even in just when I would watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith or Hollywood movies, how the sort of the emotional dynamics at play are happening behind the scenes. Do you have any sort of experience with that when you were identifying as monogamous, but working in this industry? And I'm probably assuming maybe dating people in that industry as well. I'm not sure.
So when I first started doing porn, I was in a relationship that was monogamish, for lack of a better way to describe it. I was very comfortable with my partner having sex with other people. He was less comfortable with me having sex with other people. I was with him before I got into porn. As I started doing porn, he was very enthusiastic at first. And then the jealousy started to creep in. And that relationship eventually ended pretty dramatically and not great, because the jealousy got so bad that he told me that either I had to quit my job or that I was still with him, I was still his partner, but we weren't going to have sex anymore. that he wasn't available to have sex with me if I was having sex at work.
Oh gosh, what an ultimatum.
Exactly. So I obviously chose work over him. There are some people in super loving, really wonderful monogamous relationships and marriages and like very long-term commitments in porn. And there are also people who get into relationships. It's a thing that we joke about that if a girl stops doing boy-girl scenes, if she makes a big public announcement that she's only going to be working with girls, like, oh, did she get a new boyfriend and he doesn't want her to work with boys anymore? Like it's a stereotypical joke, but the stereotype comes from a real place of that happens all the time. Including female performers and male performers will start dating each other and then start restricting who they can work with. It's not just when people date people outside of the industry and that person outside of the industry starts to get jealous and restrict. Jealousy absolutely happens within the industry too. There's been countless times when names will get added to someone's no list. A no list is the list of people who your agent knows you won't work with. Names will get added to a no list purely because their partner doesn't like that person or thinks that person has a larger penis than them and so doesn't want, just stupid stuff. Right. It happens all the time.
With that initial boyfriend, as you were getting into the industry, do you think there was the situation where he fetishized the idea of you being, a porn star, but then when the reality happened, it was just like, it just took him totally off guard and he just freaked out?
Absolutely. That's actually exactly what I think it was. I think he thought it would be so hot to have a porn star girlfriend until he had one. And then he wasn't into it anymore.
Yeah. It's like that cliche of like falling in love with the stripper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. With this kind of like dating in terms of when you started to have these first initial explorations with non-monogamy, what was the first partner within your current, long-term relationship? Because you're married to your partner.
We are not actually married anymore.
Oh.
That is a part of that is part of the disentangling.
Well, we'll get to that because that would be really interesting to talk about. But in terms of the first initial non-monogamous relationship that you had within this kind of long-term relationship, what was that like?
I wish I remembered. I don't know. That was a long time ago. I think I know who it was. If I'm remembering correctly, and this person was the first one, they ended up being uncomfortable with me having another relationship, and that is why that relationship ended. And it only was a couple months. They were looking for someone to get married to, and I wasn't available for that.
There was an incompatibility there.
Yeah.
Have you felt like one of the things that I love about non-monogamous relationships, and of course it doesn't always work out this way, but when things do come to an end, I feel like in non-monogamy, hopefully we can try and figure out something where it doesn't feel like an end. It can be a de-escalation, or it can be like a pause, or it can be just a shift and a change. Is that something that you've noticed in your non-monogamous explorations in the realms of, breakups?
Absolutely. That concept, ideology, whatever you want to call it, is very important to me in my non-monogamy journey. I feel incredibly uncomfortable with the idea of breaking up with someone and never speaking to them again. Mm-hmm. Abusive situations excluding and all of that. And that set aside, like I was saying earlier, I feel like just because something ends does not mean it was a failure. And I feel like that is so important to me at my core, this idea of things shifting and changing as feelings shift and change, and as emotions shift and change, and other partners' feelings shift and change. That sometimes you have to have really hard, really shitty conversations. But that part of being ethically non-monogamous is being able to have those hard conversations and figuring out the things that need to shift and change so that you can still remain in each other's lives in some way if you want to.
Especially when you've had a story together, and it feels so something about monogamous culture in that way. I don't like to sort of be down about monogamous culture, but in this sort of how relationships can just come to this final end. And to me, it feels like it's such a waste in a way, especially if it's somebody who you've loved and you've had some kind of emotional journey with at some point for it to end. And it is actually one of the things when I'm starting to date somebody new or we're forming that connection, without trying to be a downer on the situation, I try and say, well, what could a potential parting of ways look like at some point? Like I would always still want to be in touch, or if you moved overseas, or if you did connect with somebody else and, by honoring that new connection with them, I understand that you might need to take a step back from me, but I would still want us to have some form of care or friendship or something. And for me, it's such we kind of have to talk about how something could potentially fall away before I actually feel comfortable engaging.
That is a thing that I have learned that I want to do. I want to start having that conversation with people when I start dating again. That's been one of the things I've learned in this period of not dating, is that I do actually need to talk to people about, like, what do hard conversations look like for you? How do you handle when dynamics need to shift? All of that stuff that you just said. I haven't yet had the opportunity to have that conversation with someone, but in my little list of things to talk about with a new partner, that is definitely on there.
And so you alluded to it just before, but in terms of, if you're comfortable talking about it, I'd love for you to explain a little bit about what you meant when you were kind of moving away from that marriage with your partner, but still within a relationship with each other.
So with him and I, we've been together for 11 years. Like I was saying, actually, I think it's going to be 12 this summer. We've been together for a very long time, and I feel like I'm a very different person than I was when we first met. And in exploring polyamory, I had a couple of relationship dynamics shift outside of my relationship with him. My relationship with him started shifting, and it affected my other relationships. There was this like very interesting trickle down effect of like these relationships were stable and working, but only when I was married. And the moment that my marriage started shifting, these other relationships had to shift too. And that was a big learning experience. And him and I just had a lot of really hard conversations about not wanting to break up. I did not want to break up with him. I very much still right now want him as a part of my life, but being married and being that partnered wasn't feeling good for me anymore. And so we had a lot of conversations. We went to therapy together. We did a ton of work. Again, a big part of it was living separately. And so, he is still my best friend. I still see him every single day. We still talk all the time, every single day. We went to the gym this morning together and then got breakfast and then came home and went to our separate houses. And so for me, it was just, I guess it's what we were talking about of like in monogamous culture. And I also don't want to talk down on monogamy, because I feel like for some people, monogamy is what is best for them and what works for them. And I don't feel like non-monogamy is better than monogamy. No. But in this way of like, if we were a traditional monogamous couple who maybe didn't have the skills and the language that we have learned from being non-monogamous, it might have been a really ugly, gross breakup, and we never talked to each other again. And I didn't want that, and he didn't want that. And so instead, we just did a lot of work together. And we're doing much better now.
Amazing.
That's so powerful.
So you've gone from being in this primary, marital relationship to what it sounds like now you're like solo poly. Would you identify as solo poly?
That is what I consider myself. Yeah. I consider myself solo poly right now. I am in the solo poly space of prioritizing my relationship with myself.
One thing that we get asked often is, why would you be married if you're non-monogamous? Like, why would you take on this kind of like patriarchal institution of marriage, just for the sake of being able to say you're married, but you're still going to go off and have sex with other people? This is totally crazy. In this process like that you're talking about, have you started to kind of re-examine your relationship to that traditional notion of marriage?
Yeah. I got married because my mom wanted me to. It was very important to my mom that I got married. She knew about what I do for work. She knew about non-monogamy in vague mom kind of terms. But she just really wanted to watch me wear a white dress and walk down the aisle and do the thing that was so important to her. And so that's really the reason why I did the thing. You know, if I was ever to get married again, being American, and being a freelancer, it would be for things like healthcare and the other things that come with being American that I don't think you guys necessarily have to deal with.
No, not to the same extent. We did live in New York for 6 years, so we are very familiar. And we had our child over in New York, so we are very familiar with the healthcare system.
We understand. We know the crazy insurance systems that you guys have happening over there. It's just insane to us as Australians.
It's because it is insane.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah,
but to me, I don't. Judge is the wrong word, but I think that if people want to get married, they should get married monogamous or non-monogamous. If you want to sign that piece of paper and make that commitment to somebody for whatever reason, you should do that. I think that doing that in a non-monogamous space does come with additional challenges, and there's other conversations you have to have, and it does affect your partners. But it's not, I don't know. I guess if I think about it, it's like, okay, so sure, maybe it is this like very traditional patriarchal, whatever, you know, it's this construct. It doesn't actually mean anything. But I feel like if it means something to you, then it means something. And who am I to say like, it doesn't mean anything. It's just, you know, a piece of paper. Like if it feels like a thing you want to do, I feel like people you should do whatever you want to do.
It is very interesting. I mean, Liam and I, we got married in 2015. We had a beautiful wedding celebration. It was such a joyful, happy day. And we've sort of carved our own relationship. You know, when we talk about this piece of paper, we sort of feel like, you know, we're constantly sort of checking in and like readjusting, you know, emotionally what that commitment means to us. But it is, I totally get what you're saying, because I guess when we're thinking about, you know, the sort of values and the philosophies of non-monogamy is really about sort of really being updated in the moment and sort of being across everything and sharing that. And there's something incompatible, this idea of like making a promise for a future version of yourself, you know, and you don't really know how you're going to be feeling, you know, in 25 years. So there is something like that sort of very not in the non-monogamous mindset to sort of make that promise in front of everybody. So yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying, and it's something that we've spoken about quite a fair bit.
I do love the sense that we were able to celebrate our relationship as well.
Yeah.
And it's like you're saying, Casey, with even to be able to celebrate your relationship with your mum, and on behalf of your mum just going, oh, this is amazing. Look at her walking down the aisle in that beautiful white dress. You know, it is a beautiful gift to give other people a chance to celebrate you as well.
Yeah.
With a traditional, but that doesn't necessarily, of course, have to be like a marriage ceremony. That can be a big party. You know, there's plenty of ways to celebrate that. But I do kind of, in some ways, like the pageantry of that traditional kind of wedding. And I feel like if we were, like we always talk about the idea of just having another wedding ceremony just for fun between us two, and just having another, because it is just a joyous thing to celebrate.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it, because next year will be our 10-year wedding anniversary. And so have been thinking recently about, well, it would be so fun to do like an updated vow renewal. And when I picture what this celebration could be like, it would probably, you know, there'd be a lot of new people in our life that would be there, or different, you know, partners or some metamors. Like I can actually picture it in my mind, a particular partner that you had, I can picture her being there and like giving me a flower. Like I've just thought about it. It's like, but it sort of goes against this idea of what marriage is. I don't know. It's all very interesting.
Yeah, I guess it's complicated. The word marriage itself, I guess, has traditional values attached to it. But yeah, a wedding can be whatever you want it to be. I mean, and also my wedding was not particularly traditional by any means. And my mom did get her white dress, but I did wear a black robe over it because I was like, I don't actually really want to wear a white dress. So I wore this like black lace and silk robe over this white dress to make amazing. A nice compromise. But yeah, like a wedding can be anything. And I do think it's nice to be able to like a party is fun. Like parties are fun. Like how fun to have your friends and your family come together to celebrate you. Like that's great. Who doesn't want that? And so, yeah, I feel like it can be anything.
I mean, talking about the power of words, I'm really interested in the title of primary. Did you receive any pushback from people within the non-monogamous community who kind of thought, oh, okay, we're going straight in for this hierarchical, example of non-monogamy. There's so many issues with all this. Like, did you receive any particular backlash from the broader non-monogamous community?
I sure did. So originally the show was called Open. It was not called Primary. And Open wasn't quite working. I was like, I need another word. I like one word titles. I need something else. Okay, so it's Primary. So the core relationship, they are each other's primary partners. That's how I justified it. But also at the time when I named the show, I was so new in my polyamory journey that the connotations of this word hadn't occurred to me. And it was only as I got further in my journey. And so because of COVID, we shot season 1 of Primary in the fall of 2019, like I said, and then we didn't shoot season 2 until 2021. And in that time, I went through so much change and went on such polyamory journey. And in that journey and in talking about it publicly and talking about it with the polyamory community, got some pushback on like, you called it Primary? Like, did you call it Primary on purpose? What were you trying to say calling it Primary? And I was like, oops. wasn't necessarily my intention to like jump right into that hierarchy like that. That just, it's a learning experience.
It was where you were at the time. And of course, people watching the show, there'll be so many people who are also there at that moment as well. So there'll be so many people that will connect with that and don't they're not having these concerns coming up around, the title as well. It's a snapshot in time, as I'm sure anybody who's on a non-monogamous journey can relate to. I mean, for Liam and I, we've had, our relationship has shifted and changed over the years, and we're sort of in a place between open and, we are like open relationship, but also open to polyamorous connections if it feels right for us and for the people who we're with. And of course, there's lots of things at play with that. But it's like that, looking back to our earlier parts of non-monogamy, like, of course, we look back in time, we're like, oh, wow, that looks like incredibly couple privilege. Like, we definitely wouldn't approach this situation, now in the way that we did then, even though we had, the best of intentions. And, so that's like very much, it's a realistic part of non-monogamous into polyamorous journey for so many people.
Yeah, by the time I was writing season 3, I had this moment of panic where I actually felt very uncomfortable with the title, but there was nothing I could do. I can't change it. It's season 3. And I reconciled that. There's a line of dialogue in season 3. I can't remember it exactly right now, but it's essentially like, you are my primary partner. And I had to like get the title into it and like give it some meaning, because I was feeling so icky with this, like having chose this word to describe polyamory in a way that like it doesn't, and it definitely wasn't for my life anymore.
It's really a question of going into all these conversations with good faith and hoping that even if there is like a little linguistic trip up, that people have the good faith to actually say, well, I guess primary is a little bit divisive, but you are going in with good intentions. You are going in with an open heart to exploring the nuances of the ethical situations around all of these things that you're discussing and portraying within the series.
Yeah, I would also say, like, for any creative, for any writer, any filmmaker, you make the thing at a certain period in time, and then time passes, but that thing exists in the form that it was when you made it. And, things change. Times change. And culture shifts and evolves, but your piece of art doesn't. It's done. It's been made. It's out in the world as it was at that time. And so I think that's something that literally every creative struggles with.
Well, talking about the kind of time and journey and non-monogamous journeys, I think this is a good point to divulge something that we haven't divulged yet in the interview, and that's actually this kind of interesting parasocial relationship that we've had with all of your work, Casey. Because when we first started, when we first started seeing each other, I was very much into kink before I met Abby, and Abby hadn't really explored kink. And when we got together, that also coincided with the first time that you appeared on kink.com, which is a site that I had loved and was a member of for quite some time before meeting Abby. And I vividly remember sending Abby, what we would do is we'd send like videos to each other. I said, oh, check out this website, send me something you think might be hot. And we kind of used the kink.com scenes as a vehicle to have these initial conversations. And really, we do credit a lot of that kind of dialogue and discourse in what the conversations that we were having for the foundations of our communicative relationship that we have now. But I vividly remember sending one of your scenes. I think it maybe was your first ever scene, because we got together in 2012. And I in my research, I checked, and I think your first scene for kink.com was in 2012. And I vividly remember sending Abby the video and saying, what do you think of this? And so over the course of our relationship, there's been plenty of times where different things that you've appeared in on kink.com, we've kind of sent to each other and gone, this is amazing, like such great conversations, or, just for the eroticism of it as well.
Yeah, so it's amazing to be chatting with you, after having that experience as well. But it's so true. And we actually credit a lot of our ability to be able to sort of communicate in the way that we can with our non-monogamy from actually, watching kink.com in the way that, a scene was discussed beforehand. There's like that connection and just that radical honesty in, comfort levels and excitement and sharing, and then having the scene and then checking in afterwards and reflecting on that. Like witnessing that level of communication in that way really helped to lay the foundations for us to be able to share our own interests, our own fetishes, our own, desires with kink and spark all of those conversations, which then made it possible to really, get into the big stuff with the non-monogamy and the emotional navigating of all of that space. So yeah, it's amazing to be chatting with you, because we have been following your work for a really long time. So it's really, really cool.
No, thank you.
And it's interesting as well to have this sense of like a parasocial relationship with someone, because with the work that we do and all of Abby's writing is now we're on the other side of people coming up to us and they've listened to our podcast and they've heard us talk for so long and they're thinking, I know this person, and we're thinking we've never met you before. And it's this very strange asymmetry. And I'm interested in the asymmetry that you would feel often, because not only do you have this sense of people who've listened to interviews with you, but they also have this kind of like erotic information about what you have performed in. How much of that comes into play when you are meeting someone for the first time?
I actually had a really interesting conversation about this with a friend of mine who I've known for quite a while the other day. And we were just texting and he was like, I'm realizing that I know so much more about you than you know about me.
Mm.
And he was like, how does that work? Have you ever thought about that? And I hadn't ever really thought about that, because when I am online, I am 100% in that parasocial space. I'm very used to it. It's very comfortable for me. It's very normal.
Mm.
When I'm interacting with someone in real life, I'm not necessarily interacting with them as Casey Calvert, the porn person. I'm just being a person. And so like it did occur to me in having that conversation. It was like, okay, so if I start dating someone now, they can Google me and they can see me naked before I ever show them my naked body. Like they can just do, a couple clicks and there is my butthole. And that maybe does change a dating dynamic. They can listen to interviews where I'm talking about BDSM and assume and make assumptions about what I might want to do with them, that it may be true and maybe not. They can listen to podcasts like this and make assumptions about how I would want to interact with them that are maybe true and maybe not. And I realized in having this conversation with this friend that I have to trust the people that I'm interacting with are interacting with me back in good faith. I have to trust that they're not stalking me on the internet, for lack of a better word. And I don't necessarily mind if someone who is interested in dating me wants to Google me. That doesn't bother me. I have been naked on the internet for so long that doesn't make me feel uncomfortable. What makes me feel uncomfortable is if they Google me and they start making assumptions.
Yeah.
So I have to just trust that they're not making those assumptions. And then if they are making those assumptions, then they're probably not someone I actually want to get close to.
Does it kind of make you think about the way in which you express your eroticism when you're with a partner? Because you have so much experience in the adult industry, you were talking before about writing that erotic story on the plane, and I imagine something like that for you would be such a different expression of eroticism.
Yeah. A big part of my job is doing fan sites, doing OnlyFans, doing loyal fans. And a lot of that is having sexting conversations with people who are paying to sext with me. And I've absolutely had partners who have said, like, does this feel like work to you? When that kind of situation has naturally arisen like it does. And so I have had conversations with people where I explain to them, like, this is work. This is not work. If it's starting to feel like work, I will tell you. You need to trust me when I tell you it's not feeling like work. But I also have a boundary for me around taking nudes or lewds or any kind of like photo video stuff.
Interesting.
Because that does often feel like work to me.
Yeah.
If I do engage in something like that, I make it very clear to that person that if I take a nude selfie and I really like it, it's probably going on the internet. And I took it for you. I took it for you. You were in my mind when I took it, and I sent it to you first, but it does not belong to you. It's mine. And if I like it and I think I look hot or I think I can make money with it, it's going on the internet, and that needs to be okay with you, or don't ask me to take pictures for you.
And does it come back to those kind of traditional feminist principles of like you being having total agency over your body and your sexual expression?
Yeah. I haven't ever really thought about it like that, but it absolutely is that of like, this is me, this belongs to me. And I'm choosing to share it with you in the way that I want to.
Casey, this has been such an interesting conversation with you, and we're so grateful for you for taking the time out. We're going to continue to watch Primary and to unpack it and discuss all of the things. We want all of our listeners, please check out Primary. It is absolutely incredible. Casey's direction and her screenwriting is just unbelievable. You can feel the lived experience from many perspectives in this work. So please do check it out, everybody. Liam and I cannot recommend it enough. Casey, thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing so intimately about your own personal experiences as well. We're so, so grateful.
Yeah, it's been my absolute pleasure.
If you would like to watch Casey's award-winning series Primary, you can head to lustcinema.com. All the links to Casey's other work are in the show notes.
Thanks for tuning in to the Evolving Love podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback and support fuels our passion, and together we're building a community of curiosity, kindness, and growth.
If you would like to show your support and are interested in accessing 2 extra podcast episodes each month, along with access to my exclusive writing, you can become a premium subscriber over at evolvingloveproject.substack.com. Subscribe, comment, and let's keep the conversation going.